"Help us, our mum is sick," said identical 6-year-old triplets selling their toys to a millionaire, and he completely changes their lives. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. The freezing December wind cut through Boston's streets like a blade. But 3 small figures remained motionless on the sidewalk, their little hands red with cold, clutching a cardboard box scribbled with crayons. Emma, Grace, and Sophie Thompson, identical triplets of only 6 years old, had disheveled blonde hair and blue eyes that shone with a determination that broke hearts. "Toys for sale, help our mommy," shouted Emma, the bravest of the 3, her small voice almost swallowed by the traffic noise of Newbury Street. Grace held a one-armed doll while Sophie hugged a faded teddy bear. They didn't know they were on Boston's most expensive street, where billionaires made casual purchases that cost more than their family's annual income. Marcus Sterling stopped abruptly. The 45-year-old businessman, owner of a tech empire valued in billions, never stopped for anything. His routine was timed to the second: meetings, decisions that moved markets, private flights. But something about those 3 identical girls made him freeze in the middle of the busy sidewalk. "How much for the toys?" asked Marcus, his voice deep but gentle. The 3 looked at each other nervously. Emma stepped forward. $20 for everything, sir. Our mommy is very sick and needs expensive medicine." Marcus looked at the box. Broken toys, used coloring books, some cars without wheels. $20 was all they had in the world to try to save their mother. "I'll take everything," said Marcus, pulling a $100 bill from his wallet. "Keep the change." Grace started crying. "We don't have change, sir." "You don't need to," whispered Marcus, feeling something strange tighten in his chest. "Where is your mother now?" At the hospital," Sophie replied, her voice barely audible. "She has that bad disease that makes hair fall out. They said she might die if we can't get money for the special medicines." Marcus Sterling, the man who had built an empire without ever shedding a tear, felt his eyes welling up. There was something about those girls that reminded him of something deep and painful he preferred to keep buried. "What are your names?" he asked, kneeling to their height. "Emma, Grace, and Sophie Thompson," they replied in chorus, as they had rehearsed. "And you came here alone?" "We can't let Mommy die," said Emma, with the seriousness of someone much older. "Daddy left when she got sick. Now it's just us 3 taking care of her." Marcus stored that detail about the father. Men who abandoned families in moments of crisis were something he despised deeply. "I'm going to help you," said Marcus, not knowing why he was making that promise. "But first, you're going to take me to your mother." Massachusetts General Hospital bustled with typical Friday afternoon activity. Marcus followed the triplets through the white, sterile corridors, feeling a knot in his stomach he hadn't felt in years. The smell of disinfectant and artificial lighting transported him to memories he preferred not to revisit. "She's in room 314, whispered Grace, tugging at Marcus's expensive coat sleeve. When they entered the room, Marcus had to hold onto the door. Sarah Thompson, only 28 years old, was unrecognizable. Chemotherapy had stolen her blonde hair, leaving only sparse strands. Her face, probably once radiant like her daughter's, was pale and thin, but her blue eyes still shone with the same fierce love he had seen in the girls. "Girls? What are you doing here? I told you to stay with Mrs. Martinez." Sarah tried to sit up in bed, but weakness overcame her. "Mommy, we sold our toys." Emma ran to the bedside. "This nice man bought everything and gave us $100. Sarah looked at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and humiliation he knew well. It was the look of someone too proud to accept charity, but too desperate to refuse. "Sir, we can't accept," Sarah began, but Marcus interrupted her. "My name is Marcus Sterling, and you can accept it because it's not charity, it's an investment." Sarah frowned, confused. "An investment?" Marcus pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "Your daughters sold me those toys for $20. But what they really sold me was a lesson about courage and determination worth much more than that." Sarah began crying silently. They shouldn't be on the street selling anything. I told the neighbor to watch them, but, Mommy, Mrs. Martinez was sleeping, confessed Sophie. And we heard the doctor say you needed $5,000 medicines every month. Silence weighed in the room. Marcus did a quick mental calculation. $5,000 per month. At least 6 months of treatment. $30,000. For him, it was what he spent on a week's vacation. Sarah, said Marcus gently, tell me your story. How did you get here? Sarah took a deep breath. David and I married young. I was 19, he was 21. When we found out it would be triplets, we were terrified but happy. David worked construction. I was a receptionist at a medical office. She paused to catch her breath. Everything was going well until last September. I started feeling very tired, with constant headaches. I thought it was just stress from taking care of 3 small children alone. David always worked 12-hour days. Marcus noticed the girls instinctively moved closer to their mother, as if they could protect her with love alone. When the diagnosis came, stage 3 breast cancer, David panicked. He said he couldn't watch me wasting away like that. One night, he simply went out to buy cigarettes and never came back. The anger Marcus felt was instant and visceral. He abandoned you when you needed him most. Medical bills started piling up. I lost my job because I couldn't work during chemo. Insurance covers the basics, but the experimental medications that could save me, those cost a fortune. Marcus looked at the 3 girls, who listened to everything with frightening maturity for their age. How long did the doctors give you? Marcus asked delicately. Without the complete treatment. 6 months, maybe 8. Sarah held her daughter's hands. With the right medications, 90% chance of complete cure. Marcus Sterling made a decision that would change their lives forever. You're going to have those medications. I can't accept this, Sarah said for the 10th time. Looking at the check Marcus had written, $50,000, more money than she had seen in her entire lifetime. Marcus was sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair, still wearing his $3,000 suit, but there was something different about his posture. The girls had snuggled around him like he was a magnet, and he didn't seem to mind that Grace was leaving chocolate marks on his silk tie. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, Marcus began, his voice lower. 15 years ago, I was also in this hospital. My wife was dying of cancer, and my daughter was the same age Emma, Grace, and Sophie are now. The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed to quiet for a moment. I had money, all the best doctors, the most expensive treatments in the world. But you know what I didn't have? Time. I worked 20 hours a day building my empire, thinking money would solve everything. Marcus paused, breathing deeply. When my wife died, my daughter looked me in the eyes and said, Daddy, you were never really here, were you? Emma dropped her doll and touched Marcus's hand. What happened to your little girl? Marcus smiled sadly. She grew up hating me for being a ghost in her life. Now she lives in Europe and hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. Sarah understood immediately. That's why you want to help us? No. Marcus shook his head. I want to help you because you reminded me of what really matters. Emma, Grace, and Sophie did something I never did. They put love above everything. They sold their only treasures to save their mother. Sophie climbed into Marcus's lap without ceremony. Are you going to be our daddy now? Marcus's heart raced. No, sweetheart, you already have a wonderful mommy, but I can be a special friend, an Uncle Marcus. Uncle Marcus! The 3 shouted in chorus, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah laughed genuinely. Dr. Harrison, Sarah's oncologist, entered the room at that moment. Mrs. Thompson, I have news about the experimental protocol. He stopped seeing Marcus. Mr. Sterling, I didn't know you knew each other. Marcus smiled. Dr. Harrison and I know each other from the hospital board. Harrison, Mrs. Thompson will start the complete protocol on Monday. But, sir, the cost. It's approved. And, Doctor, Marcus stood up, still with Sophie in his lap. I want her to have the best of everything. Private room, dedicated nurses, anything that increases her chances. Dr. Harrison nodded, clearly impressed. With this protocol, your chances go up to 95%, Mrs. Thompson. Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and hope. There's one condition, said Marcus, causing a moment of tension. The girls will stay at my house while you're hospitalized for intensive treatment. No! Sarah became alarmed. They barely know you. Mommy, said Emma with her child's wisdom, Uncle Marcus has sad eyes like ours. People with sad eyes take care of each other. Marcus felt something inside him break and rebuild simultaneously. I promise you, Sarah, that I'll protect them as if they were my own daughters, and you'll be able to see them every day. Grace tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Uncle Marcus, do you have games at your house? I have an entire room just for games, Marcus laughed. And a heated pool, and a cinema, and food, asked Sophie hopefully. All the food you could want. Sarah looked at her daughters, then at Marcus. There was something in the way he interacted with them, a genuine tenderness mixed with a deep pain she recognized. It was the look of someone who had lost much and was trying to find redemption. Okay, Sarah whispered, but only until I get better. Marcus nodded solemnly. Only until you get better. But everyone in the room, including the girls, knew something much bigger was beginning. Some families aren't born. They find each other in the most unexpected moments and choose each other. Marcus Sterling's mansion in Beacon Hill was a monument to success and loneliness. 22 rooms, 8 bathrooms, a library that looked like it came from a movie, but when the triplets entered for the first time, they only had eyes for one thing. The complete absence of family life. Where are the pictures? Asked Grace, looking at walls filled with expensive but cold modern art. Marcus stopped in the middle of the marble hall. In 15 years living in that house, no one had ever asked that question. What pictures? Family pictures, said Emma. Everyone has family pictures. In our little house, there were pictures of us everywhere, added Sophie sadly. Mommy said they made the house seem full of love. Marcus swallowed hard. There were photos, boxes and boxes of them stored in the attic, all from the time before the divorce. Perfect family portraits that became lies after the tragedy. Do you want to see your rooms? He diverted the subject. The girls were impressed with the rooms Marcus had hastily prepared. He had bought half a toy store, but the triplets seemed more interested in the window view, which showed other houses with real families. Uncle Marcus, said Emma after dinner prepared by Marcus's personal chef, don't you feel lonely in this big house? Marcus was washing dishes, something he hadn't done in years, but seemed natural with the girls helping. Sometimes. Is that why you drink that brown liquid that smells strong? Asked Sophie with children's brutal honesty. Marcus froze. He didn't know they had noticed the whiskey he drank every night. How do you know about that? Daddy used to drink the same thing, said Grace quietly, especially after Mommy got sick. He got sadder and angrier. The picture was forming in Marcus's mind. David Thompson hadn't just abandoned the family. He had been drowning in alcohol and self-pity before that. Do you want to tell me about when Daddy left? Marcus asked gently, sitting on the kitchen floor to be at their height. The three looked at each other, communicating through that special bond only twins possess. Emma spoke first. At first, when Mommy started getting sick, Daddy pretended everything was normal, but he stopped smiling. And he started coming home late from work, continued Grace. Mommy said he was working more to pay for medicines, but we knew he was lying. Sophie climbed into Marcus's lap. The night he left, we heard him yelling at Mommy. He said he couldn't look at her bald anymore and that we were too noisy when he wanted to watch TV. Marcus felt rage boiling in his veins. What kind of man abandons 3 6-year-old children and a wife fighting cancer? Mommy cried all night, continued Emma. In the morning, she sat us in the kitchen and said Daddy had gone traveling for a very long time, but that it wasn't our fault. But we knew it was a lie, said Grace, because all the men on TV who have sick wives stay and take care of them. Only Daddy left. Marcus hugged the 3 girls. Not all fathers are like yours. Some fathers stay. Some fathers fight, like you would, asked Sophie. The question cut Marcus like a knife, because the truth was he had been as absent as David, just in a different way. He had stayed physically, but emotionally he had fled to work. "I don't know if I'd be better than your father," Marcus admitted honestly, "but I hope I would be." "You are better," said Emma with conviction, "because you came looking for us. Daddy left, but you came." That night, after the girls finally slept, all three in the same bed, even though they had separate rooms, Marcus went up to the attic for the first time in 5 years. Among dusty boxes, he found the photos he had hidden. Him, Rachel, and Charlotte in happier times. One photo in particular made him stop. Charlotte at 6 years old, in Rachel's lap at the hospital, both laughing at something he had said. It was one of the last photos before Rachel died, and he vaguely remembered having rushed to a meeting right after taking it. Marcus went down to the kitchen and, for the first time in 15 years, poured his whiskey down the sink instead of drinking it. The triplets were right about one thing. Some things only make sadness worse. He looked at the stairs, where 3 girls slept, trusting him completely, and made a silent promise. This time he wouldn't run away. 3 weeks later, the routine had established itself in a way Marcus never imagined possible. At 6 in the morning, 3 small invaders jumped on his king-size bed, transforming his minimalist master suite into a pillow fight battlefield. "Uncle Marcus! Uncle Marcus! It's time to visit Mommy!" Emma shouted, always the first to wake up. Marcus had discovered that being a substitute father to 6-year-old triplets required more energy than running a multinational corporation. But strangely, he had never felt so alive. "Good morning, earthquakes," Marcus grumbled, pretending to be irritated while Grace and Sophie hung from his arms like monkeys. The morning routine had become a sacred ritual. Breakfast, which now included Mickey Mouse-shaped pancakes, courtesy of Chef Paul, who had adapted surprisingly well to childish demands. Then, the hour-long drive to the hospital, where Sarah anxiously awaited the daily visit. Sarah was much better. 2 weeks of the experimental protocol had brought impressive results. Her hair was beginning to grow back in fine blonde fuzz, and the sparkle had returned to her eyes. "How were private lessons yesterday?" asked Sarah as the girls settled around her bed. Marcus had hired a private teacher so the girls wouldn't miss the school year. Miss Jennifer was a young Harvard pedagogue who came to the mansion every day. "Miss Jennifer said we're very smart," said Sophie proudly, "and that our math is better than many children our age." "That's because you've always been special," smiled Sarah, but Marcus noticed a shadow in her eyes. Later, when the girls were distracted coloring, Sarah pulled Marcus to a corner of the room. "Marcus, I need to tell you something that's worrying me." "What is it? Did the tests show something bad?" "No, it's not about my health. It's about David." Sarah took a deep breath. "He showed up here last night." Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense. "What? And you didn't tell me?" "No. It happened after you left. He was different, drunk but not aggressive. He was crying and apologizing." "What did he want?" "He said he heard that some rich guy was taking care of the girls and that he wanted them back." Sarah gripped Marcus's arm. "Marcus, he has no legal right over them. We were never officially married. And when he left, he didn't leave any documents." "But even so what? He's still their biological father, if he wants to fight for custody." Marcus felt a chill in his stomach that had nothing to do with money or business. It was pure paternal terror, something he didn't know existed until he met the triplets. "Did he see them? Talk to them?" "No. I told security not to let him up. But Marcus," Sarah hesitated, "he seemed desperate. He said he heard you're a billionaire and that nobody's going to steal his daughters from him." Marcus started pacing. His business instinct kicked in. "I'll hire the best family lawyers in Boston. We'll make sure he has no legal basis to—" "Marcus, stop!" Sarah interrupted him. "It's not about laws. It's about what's right." "What's right? He abandoned them when you were dying. He's also their father. And as much as it hurts to admit, maybe the desperation of losing his daughters is exactly what he needs to change." Duh. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at Sarah with disbelief. You're defending him. I'm being realistic. The girls ask about their father constantly. They deserve the chance to have a complete family if possible. At that moment, Emma appeared beside them. Who are you talking about? Marcus and Sarah looked at each other. Emma was frighteningly perceptive for a 6-year-old. About nothing important, sweetheart, said Sarah quickly. It's about Daddy, isn't it? Emma crossed her small arms. You think we're too little to understand, but we understand everything. Grace and Sophie approached, forming their usual united front. We don't want to see Daddy, said Grace categorically. He left when we needed him most, added Sophie. Uncle Marcus stayed. Marcus knelt in front of the three. If your father wants to see you, you'll have to decide what you want to do. And if we don't want to? Asked Emma. Then I'll make sure no one forces you to do anything, promised Marcus. Sarah watched the interaction with tears in her eyes. In 3 weeks, Marcus had become more of a father to her daughters than David had been in 6 years. But everyone knew the storm was just beginning. David Thompson hadn't appeared to apologize. He had come to declare war. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Marcus was in the Home Office, trying to balance a video conference with Japanese investors and supervising the triplets' homework, when the doorbell rang insistently. Through the security cameras, he saw a tall, thin man with wrinkled clothes and a desperate expression. David Thompson had found the mansion. Girls, go up to your rooms, said Marcus calmly, but the triplets caught the tension in his voice. Is it Daddy? Asked Emma, her face paling. Marcus nodded. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. We want to, said Emma surprisingly. But we want you to stay with us. David Thompson, at 30, looked like he had aged a decade. His blue eyes, identical to his daughter's, were bloodshot and surrounded by deep, dark circles. His hands trembled slightly, signs of alcohol withdrawal or extreme nervousness. Where are my daughters? Were the first words he said when Marcus opened the door. Hello, David, I'm Marcus Sterling. Marcus kept his voice polite but firm. The girls are well and safe. I didn't come to talk to you. David pushed past Marcus and entered the house. I came to get my daughters. Daddy? Sophie's small voice echoed from the top of the staircase. David looked up, and Marcus saw something break in his face. The 3 girls slowly descended the stairs, positioning themselves strategically near Marcus. My God, whispered David, how you've grown. Hi, Daddy, said Emma politely, but without moving from her protective position beside Marcus. David knelt, opening his arms. Come give Daddy a hug. I missed you so much. The girls looked at each other, but none moved. Why did you leave? She asked Grace directly. David hesitated, looking at Marcus as if he were responsible for the difficult question. Daddy was confused. Mommy was sick, and I didn't know how to help. Uncle Marcus knew how to help, said Sophie simply. The innocent observation was like a slap in David's face. His expression changed, becoming harder. He's not your uncle, said David, standing up. He's a stranger playing family with you. David, said Marcus calmly, maybe we should talk alone first. No, I want my daughters to hear this. David turned to the girls. This man isn't your family. He's just a bored rich guy, using you to feel better about his own empty life. Emma stepped forward with courage that impressed Marcus. Uncle Marcus saved Mommy. You let her die. Emma! David was shocked. I never! You said you couldn't look at her bald anymore, continued Emma, relentless. We heard, and then you left. David looked at Marcus with pure hatred. You filled their heads against me. Actually, said Marcus calmly, we never talked about you. Everything they know comes from their own memories. Daddy, said Grace gently, you can visit Mommy with us tomorrow. She's getting much better. David seemed surprised. She is getting better. The experimental protocol is working, explained Marcus. The doctors are optimistic. For a moment, David seemed genuinely relieved, but then the anger returned. How much is it costing? Asked David suspiciously. That doesn't matter, replied Marcus. Of course it matters. You're buying my family. Sophie started crying silently. The other two positioned themselves beside her, forming their habitual defense. "David," said Marcus, his patience running out, "you're scaring your daughters." "They're my daughters, and I'm taking them back." "We don't want to go," said Emma firmly. "We want to stay with Uncle Marcus and Mommy. You don't have a choice. I'm your father." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between David and the girls. "Actually, they do have a choice, and so do you." "What kind of choice?" Marcus took a deep breath. It was a risky move, but maybe it was the only way to resolve this without further traumatizing the triplets. "Prove you've changed," said Marcus. "Enter rehabilitation, get a stable job, show you can be the father they deserve, and then we talk about a shared custody arrangement." David blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "You do that? Even having all the money in the world to fight me in court?" Marcus looked at the three girls, who watched him with eyes full of trust. "I'd do it because it's what's best for them. A child deserves to have a father, but only if that father is capable of putting them first." David was silent for a long moment. Finally, he knelt again in front of his daughters. "Daddy's going to try to be better," he promised. "But it's going to take time." "How long?" asked Sophie. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise I'll try." When David left, the triplets crowded around Marcus. "Would you really let him take us?" asked Emma. Marcus hugged them. "Only if you wanted to go, and only if he proved he really changed." "And if he doesn't change?" asked Grace. Marcus smiled sadly. "Then you stay with me as long as you want." Thus, what none of them knew was that this would be the easiest conversation they'd have about David Thompson, because a desperate man is capable of things a changed man would never do. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the mansion, Marcus received a call that would change everything. It was Monday morning, and he was helping the triplets with breakfast when his phone rang. "Mr. Sterling, this is Rebecca Martinez from Thornfield and Associates law firm. I'm calling about a custody proceeding that's been filed against you." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee cup. "A custody proceeding?" "David Thompson is contesting your temporary guardianship of minors Emma, Grace, and Sophie Thompson. He alleges that you kidnapped his daughters and are manipulating their mother through financial coercion." The triplets stopped eating, sensing the tension in Marcus's voice. Emma moved closer to him, touching his arm in silent support. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, trying to stay calm in front of the girls. "I have full authorization from their mother." "Mr. Sterling, I need to inform you that verbal authorization from the mother doesn't constitute legal custody when there's a biological father contesting. David Thompson has presented paternity tests and birth certificates." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "What does this mean exactly?" "It means you need legal representation immediately, and the girls need to return to temporary custody of either the father or the state until the custody hearing." "When?" asked Marcus, though he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "This afternoon. A bailiff should arrive at your residence at 3 p.m. to escort the minors." Marcus hung up with trembling hands. How had David managed to get a lawyer? Where had he gotten money for legal proceedings? "Uncle Marcus?" Grace asked worriedly. "Are you okay?" Marcus knelt beside the three girls, holding their small hands. "Girls, do you remember when we talked about difficult choices?" All three nodded gravely. "Your father wants you to come back to live with him. Legally, he has rights, because he's your biological father." Emma went pale. "But we don't want to go." "I know, sweetheart. And I'm going to fight, so you don't have to go if you don't want to. But this afternoon, a judge is going to want to hear what you have to say." Sophie started crying. "What if the judge makes us go with Daddy?" Marcus hugged all three. "Then I'll keep fighting every day until you come back home." "This is our home," said Grace firmly, "with you and Mommy." Marcus smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. "And it always will be, no matter what happens." At 2:30 p.m., Marcus called the hospital. "Sarah, I need to tell you something urgent." When he explained the situation, Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Marcus," she finally said, "there's something I didn't tell you about David." "What?" "He didn't get money for a lawyer on his own. His mother, Dorothy Thompson, is financing this. She never accepted me and always blamed our relationship for David's problems. Marcus felt a puzzle piece click into place. She has money? The Thompson family has a construction company worth a few million. Dorothy always said I was holding back David and that he would be successful if it weren't for me and the problematic children. The picture was becoming clear. David hadn't sought out his daughters out of love. He had been manipulated by his mother into seeing an opportunity to humiliate Sarah and Marcus. "Sarah, I need you to get dressed and come here. The girls are going to need to see you before." "Before what, Marcus?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Before they're taken away." The silence on the other end was deafening. At exactly 3 p.m., 3 cars arrived at Marcus's mansion. David Thompson got out of the first, accompanied by an older woman with a stern expression, clearly Dorothy Thompson. From the second car came a bailiff, and from the third, a social worker. Marcus opened the door before they rang the bell. Behind him, the triplets hid, clinging to his pants. "Mr. Sterling," said the officer, "I have a temporary custody warrant for minors Emma, Grace, and Sophie Thompson. May I see the document?" While Marcus quickly read the warrant, David approached his daughters. "Hello, girls. Daddy came to take you home." "This is our home," said Emma bravely. Dorothy Thompson stepped forward. "Don't be rude to your father, young lady. You'll learn good manners when you're with us." The coldness in the woman's voice made Marcus shudder. "And you are?" "Dorothy Thompson, grandmother of these children and temporary legal guardian designated by the court." Bree. Marcus looked at the document again. It was true. Until the custody hearing, the girls would stay with Dorothy Thompson, not with David. "Where is my mother?" asked Sophie suddenly. Everyone turned. Sarah was getting out of a taxi, still visibly weak from treatment, but determined. "Mommy!" All three ran to her. Sarah hugged her daughters, then looked directly at Dorothy. "Hello, Dorothy." "Sarah?" The greeting was icy. "I see you're still sick." "I'm getting better, thank you." Well, the girls don't need to be exposed to more instability. They'll stay with me until David proves he's capable of caring for them properly." Marcus understood the play. Dorothy didn't want David to have the girls. She wanted to control the situation and humiliate Sarah. "And where will they stay?" asked Marcus. "At the family property in Brookline, a suitable environment for children from good families." The triplets looked at each other, terrified. Emma spoke for all. "We don't want to go." "And is just what you want doesn't matter," said Dorothy coldly. "Your children." Sarah stepped forward. "Dorothy, for God's sake, they barely know you." "And whose fault is that? You drove my son away from his family." Marcus had heard enough. "Excuse me," he interrupted, "but I have a legal question." Everyone turned to him. "Does the warrant specify that the girls must stay with Mrs. Thompson specifically, or just that they must leave my house?" The officer checked the document. "It specifies temporary custody with Dorothy Thompson, designated temporary guardian." Marcus smiled. It was a risky move, but he had to try. "And what if Mrs. Thompson isn't fit to care for 3 6-year-old children?" "What are you insinuating?" Dorothy was indignant. "I'm not insinuating anything. I'm simply asking about the background check and home evaluation procedures that were certainly conducted before granting temporary custody to someone." The officer looked uncomfortable. "Well, in family cases, no checks were done, were they?" Marcus pressed. "Because if they were, they would have discovered that Mrs. Thompson has 2 charges of driving under the influence in the last 5 years. Dorothy paled. "How do you know?" "Because I have the best private investigators in Boston," Marcus lied smoothly. "And because anyone responsible for 3 children should be properly investigated." Sarah looked at Marcus with admiration. He was buying time. "Officer," continued Marcus, "I suggest we contact the court to clarify whether adequate background checks were performed before granting temporary custody." What Marcus didn't say was that he had already done those checks, and what he had discovered about Dorothy Thompson and her family would make this case much more interesting than David imagined. The call to the court resulted in a 48-hour postponement for adequate background checks. Marcus knew he had only bought 2 days, but 2 days could be crucial. That night, after the girls finally slept, all three in Marcus's bed, too traumatized to be alone, Marcus locked himself in his office with his private investigator, James Crawford. "What did you find about the Thompson family?" asked Marcus. James opened a thick file. "More than we expected. Thompson Construction Company has been in financial trouble for 2 years. Dorothy Thompson has 2 DUIs, as you mentioned, but that's just the beginning. Continue. David Thompson was fired from 3 jobs in the last 6 months for showing up drunk to work. He owes $28,000 in back child support to an ex-girlfriend he had a child with before meeting Sarah." Marcus stopped walking. "He has another child? An 8-year-old boy named Tyler. The mother, Jessica Morrison, has a restraining order against David for domestic violence." Jesus Christ, it gets worse. "Dorothy Thompson is being investigated by the IRS for tax evasion. The family company could be shut down within 6 months. Marcus sat heavily. "So why do they want the triplets?" James smiled grimly. "Because someone told them about your wealth. They don't want the girls. They want a slice of your money through a custody action. Dorothy probably plans to ask for substantial child support to care for the triplets. They can't be that stupid. Desperate people do desperate things, Marcus. And there's something else." Marcus looked at James. "Dorothy hired Philip Thornfield as a lawyer. Thornfield is known for petty cases involving money. He's not a family lawyer. He's a specialist in extracting financial settlements from rich people." Marcus felt anger boiling. "They're using 3 6-year-old children as pawns in a blackmail scheme." "Exactly, and that gives us ammunition." The next morning, Marcus woke up to Sophie gently shaking his shoulder. "Uncle Marcus, did you sleep in the office again?" Marcus sat up, realizing he had fallen asleep on the documents. "Sorry, sweetheart. Daddy was working to protect you." Sophie climbed into his lap. "Are you our daddy now?" The simple question almost broke Marcus's heart. "I would like to be, Sophie. Very much. We would like that too," said Emma from the doorway with Grace beside her. Marcus hugged all three. "Then let's make that happen." 2 hours later, Marcus was in court with Boston's best family lawyer, Margaret Chen. Sarah was beside him, still pale but determined. Across the room, David sat with Dorothy and Philip Thornfield, an oily 50-year-old man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your Honor," began Thornfield, "my client is simply trying to recover his daughters from a man who kidnapped them using financial coercion." "Objection," said Margaret calmly. "There was no kidnapping. The girls are under Mr. Sterling's care with full authorization from their mother, Judge Linda Morrison." Coincidentally, no relation to Jessica Morrison, looked at the documents. "Mr. Thornfield, I see your client abandoned these children 2 years ago when their mother was diagnosed with cancer. Why this sudden interest in custody?" Thornfield coughed. "My client was going through personal difficulties. Now he's ready to resume his parental responsibilities. And Mrs. Dorothy Thompson would be the temporary guardian because Mr. Sterling is a stranger who is buying the children's affection, and Mrs. Sarah Thompson is too sick to care for them adequately." Margaret stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence about Mrs. Dorothy Thompson's suitability as a guardian." "Proceed." Margaret handed documents to the court. "Mrs. Thompson has 2 convictions for driving under the influence in the last 5 years. She's also being investigated by the IRS for tax evasion." Dorothy turned red. "That's irrelevant. And furthermore," continued Margaret, "Mr. David Thompson owes substantial child support for another child and has a restraining order for domestic violence." "That's a lie!" David stood up. "Silence," said the judge. "Mr. Thompson, are these accusations true?" David looked at his lawyer in panic. Thornfield whispered something in his ear. "My client has the right to due process," said Thornfield evasively. The judge was not impressed. "Ms. Chen, where are the children now?" "Safe with Mr. Sterling, Your Honor. They have repeatedly expressed that they don't want to go with their father or paternal grandmother." 6-year-old children can't make legal decisions, protested Thornfield. But I can, said a voice from the gallery. Everyone turned. Jessica Morrison had entered the courtroom. I'm Jessica Morrison, mother of David Thompson's son. I'd like to testify about Mr. Thompson's character as a father. The room fell into absolute silence. Margaret smiled. Your Honor, I'd like to call Jessica Morrison as a witness. Thornfield stood up quickly. Objection, irrelevant. Overruled, said the judge firmly. Ms. Morrison, please approach. Jessica Morrison was a woman of about 30, with visible scars on her face that looked old but unmistakable. She approached the stand with quiet dignity. Ms. Morrison, said Margaret gently, can you tell us about your experience with David Thompson as a father? Jessica took a deep breath. David was violent with me during our relationship. When our son Tyler was born, David disappeared for weeks. When he came back, he was always drunk and aggressive. She's lying, shouted David. Mr. Thompson, one more interruption and you'll be removed from this courtroom, warned the judge. Jessica continued, David hasn't paid child support in 2 years. Tyler asks about his father, but I have to protect him. David broke my nose when Tyler was 2 because the baby was crying too much. The silence in the room was deafening. And about Dorothy Thompson? Asked Margaret. She knew about the violence and said it was my fault for provoking David. She even offered money for me to disappear with Tyler. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was crying silently. The revelations were worse than anyone had imagined. Miss Morrison, said the judge, do you have any opinion about Mr. Thompson's suitability to care for 3 6-year-old girls? Jessica looked directly at David. He shouldn't be near any children until he proves he's changed. And based on what I know of him, that will never happen. The judge banged her gavel. Temporary custody remains with Mr. Sterling. Permanent custody hearing scheduled for 2 weeks. Mr. Thompson, you have the right to supervised visits if you wish. David stood up furiously. This isn't over. But Marcus knew that for all practical purposes, it was over. Dorothy and David had shown their true characters in front of a court. When they left the courthouse, the triplets were waiting with Miss Jennifer in the hall. Uncle Marcus! They ran to him. Can we go home now? Asked Emma. Marcus hugged them. Yes, sweethearts, let's go home. But as they walked to the car, Marcus couldn't ignore the feeling that David Thompson hadn't played his last card yet. 3 days after the hearing, Marcus thought the worst was over. The triplets returned to their normal routine, private lessons in the morning, visits to Sarah at the hospital in the afternoon, and family evenings at the mansion. Sarah was almost ready for discharge. Doctors were optimistic about her complete recovery, and even the girls seemed to be recovering from the trauma. Then came the call. Marcus, said Margaret Chen, her voice tense, we need to meet immediately. What happened? David Thompson disappeared, and he took Tyler, his son, with Jessica Morrison. Marcus felt his blood freeze. What does that have to do with us? Jessica thinks he might try something with the triplets. David called her last night, drunk, talking about showing everyone he can be a good father, and about not letting some rich guy steal his family. Marcus looked out the office window, where he could see the triplets playing in the garden under Miss Jennifer's careful supervision. He wouldn't be stupid enough to... Marcus, desperate men do desperate things, and David, just lost in court, was publicly humiliated and is probably under pressure from his mother. Marcus immediately called his security team. I want 24-hour protection for the girls. No one approaches them without my authorization. But David Thompson was smarter than Marcus had calculated. On Thursday, while Marcus was in an urgent business meeting he couldn't postpone, Miss Jennifer took the triplets to their weekly swimming lesson at the exclusive Beacon Hill Club. It was an established routine for weeks, and the club had its own security. David had been watching this routine for days. Girls, a familiar voice called them as they came out of the changing rooms. What a surprise to find you here. It was Dorothy Thompson, elegantly dressed and smiling as if she were the most caring grandmother in the world. Miss Jennifer immediately positioned herself between Dorothy and the girls. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Sterling was very clear about not allowing unsupervised contact. Oh dear, said Dorothy condescendingly. I just want to talk to my granddaughters for a minute. Surely there's no problem with a grandmother talking to children in a public place." The triplets huddled behind Miss Jennifer. "We don't want to talk to her," said Emma clearly. "Don't be rude, girls," said Dorothy, her tone getting colder. "Family is family, no matter what that strange man told you." "He's not strange," said Grace bravely. "He's our Uncle Marcus, and he takes care of us." Dorothy stepped closer. "He's not real family to you. I am, and soon, very soon, you'll understand that." Miss Jennifer pulled out her cell phone. "I'm calling Mr. Sterling now." "That won't be necessary," said a male voice behind them. Everyone turned. David Thompson was there, but something about him was different. His eyes had a manic intensity that wasn't present in court. "Daddy," Sophie whispered, instinctively hiding behind her sisters. "Hello, girls. Daddy came to take you on a special trip." Miss Jennifer stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, you don't have the right to unsupervised visits. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." David laughed, a cold sound that made the children cringe. "I'm their father. I have the right to see them." "Not without court supervision," Miss Jennifer said firmly, dialing 911. David moved faster than anyone expected. He snatched the phone from Miss Jennifer's hand and threw it in the pool. "Now," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "my daughters are going to come with me voluntarily, or I'm going to have to insist." "No," screamed Emma. "We don't want to go." "You don't have a choice," said David, grabbing Sophie by the arm. Sophie started screaming. Miss Jennifer threw herself between David and the other two girls. "Let her go now. Get your hands off me." David pushed Miss Jennifer, who fell and hit her head on the pool edge. Blood started flowing from her forehead. The triplets were hysterical now. Grace and Emma ran to help Miss Jennifer, but Dorothy intercepted them. "Enough of this nonsense," said Dorothy coldly. "You're coming with us now, and you're going to stop making this scene." "Help!" screamed Emma as loud as she could. "Help! They're taking us!" Some people at the club started looking, but David and Dorothy seemed not to care about subtlety anymore. "You can scream all you want," said David, grabbing Emma and Grace. "I'm your father. No one's going to stop a father from taking his own daughters. But someone could. Let go of my girls." Marcus's voice echoed through the pool area like thunder. He was at the entrance, with 2 security guards beside him, and his expression was more murderous than anyone had ever seen. David turned, still holding the triplets. "You have no right over them. Let them go. Now." Marcus started walking toward David, and there was something in his posture that made even Dorothy step back. "Or what?" David challenged. "You're going to hit me in front of witnesses?" Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "I don't need to hit you, David. I just sent a video of this kidnapping attempt to the police. They should arrive in about 3 minutes." As if summoned, sirens began wailing in the distance. David seemed to realize for the first time the gravity of the situation. He had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. "This doesn't end here," he said, releasing the girls. The triplets ran to Marcus, who hugged them tightly. "Yes, it does," said Marcus calmly. "It ends exactly here." When the police arrived, they found David and Dorothy Thompson trying to leave discreetly through the back of the club. The escape attempt only confirmed their guilt. Later at the hospital, while Miss Jennifer received stitches, she was fine, thank God, the triplets snuggled around Marcus. "Uncle Marcus," said Sophie, "Daddy scared us." "I know, sweetheart, and he'll never scare you again." "Promise?" asked Grace. Marcus looked at his 3 girls, because that's what they were now, his girls, and made the only promise that really mattered. "I promise I'll always protect you, always." But even as he said it, Marcus knew David Thompson still had one card to play, and when desperate men are cornered, they become more dangerous than ever. The phone call came at 2:37 a.m., 2 days after the incident at the club. Marcus woke immediately. Since the triplets came into his life, he had developed the light sleep of a protective father. "Marcus Sterling?" The voice was unfamiliar, tense. "Who is this?" "Detective Ray Sullivan, Boston Police Department." "Sir, we need you to come to the station immediately." Marcus sat up in bed, completely alert. "What happened?" "It's about David Thompson." Marcus looked across the hallway. The triplets were sleeping safely in their rooms, protected by security guards he had hired after the incident. Was he arrested? "Mr. Sterling," said the detective carefully, "David Thompson is dead." The world stopped. "How?" Marcus managed to ask. "Car accident. It appears he was drunk, lost control of the vehicle on Route 1, hit a tree, died instantly." Marcus closed his eyes. He should feel relief. The threat was over, but all he could think about was how to tell 3 6-year-old girls that their father was dead. "Detective, there's something else you're not telling me." Sullivan hesitated. Tyler Morrison, his other son, was in the car. Marcus's heart stopped. "Is he alive, but in critical condition? And Mr. Sterling, there's something strange about this accident." An hour later, Marcus was at the police station, looking at evidence that didn't make sense. "David had been drinking," explained Sullivan, "but not as much as the wreckage suggests. And there are brake marks indicating he tried to stop, but the brakes failed." "Are you saying it wasn't an accident?" "I'm saying we're investigating all possibilities." Sullivan showed photos of the destroyed car. "And there's something else. David left this on the passenger seat. It was a handwritten letter, crumpled and stained, but legible. Marcus Sterling, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I know you hate me and I deserve it, but there are things you need to know. My mother forced me to sue you. She said you were just a rich guy playing at being a father, and that we could get a lot of money if we played our cards right. I was desperate and stupid. And the truth is, you're a better father to my daughters in 3 weeks than I was in 6 years. Emma, Grace, and Sophie deserve someone who puts them first. You did that. I never did. There's something about my mother you need to know. She won't stop. She has big debts and sees the girls as a way to get to your money. If something happens to me, she'll try another approach. Take care of Tyler for me. He doesn't deserve a life like the one I had. Sorry for everything. David." Marcus read the letter twice, feeling a confusing mixture of anger, pity, and suspicion. "Detective, where is Dorothy Thompson now?" "That's the thing. No one can find her. She disappeared right after we learned about the accident." Marcus felt a chill. What if it wasn't an accident? "What do you mean? What if Dorothy found out about this letter? What if she realized David was changing his mind about the lawsuit?" Sullivan frowned. "Are you suggesting the mother sabotaged her own son's car?" "I'm suggesting that a woman who offered money for Jessica Morrison to disappear with Tyler is capable of anything." Sullivan nodded slowly. "We'll investigate Dorothy Thompson, too." Marcus drove back home in complete silence, trying to process everything. When he arrived, he found Sarah waiting in the living room. She had been discharged from the hospital the day before and was staying in the guest room until she fully recovered. "Marcus, where were you? The security guard said you had to leave for an emergency." Marcus sat beside her and told her everything. Sarah was silent for a long moment. "My God, the girls. How are we going to tell them?" "Together," said Marcus, "and we'll be honest, but gentle." "And Tyler? That boy has no one left." Marcus had already thought about that. "Jessica has legal custody, but if she needs help—" "Marcus," Sarah interrupted, touching his hand, "you saved my family. You gave us a new life, but you can't save everyone." Mayor Marcus looked at her, this incredible woman who had fought cancer, raised triplets alone, and still had enough compassion to worry about the son of the man who abandoned her. "Maybe not," he said, "but I can try." At 7 a.m., Marcus and Sarah woke the triplets together. They immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" asked Emma, always the most perceptive. Marcus knelt in front of the 3. "Girls, I have very sad news to tell you. It's about your daddy." The triplets' faces became serious. "Is he dead?" asked Grace directly. Marcus blinked, surprised. "How did you?" "He was very sad and angry," explained Sophie. "Very sad people sometimes die." "Yes," said Marcus gently. "Daddy died in a car accident last night." The 3 girls looked at each other, communicating in that silent language only twins possess. "Should we be sad?" asked Emma. The question broke Marcus's heart. "You can feel whatever you want. It's normal to be confused when someone dies, even if we weren't close to that person. Auntie, we're sad that he died, said Grace carefully, but we're not sad that he can't scare us anymore. Sarah started crying silently. Sophie climbed into Marcus's lap. Does this mean you can be our real daddy now? Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded through her tears. If you want, said Marcus, and if your mother agrees, I would very much like to be your daddy officially. Yes! All three shouted in chorus, throwing themselves into his arms. But even in that moment of joy, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Dorothy Thompson. Where was she? And what was she planning to do now that she had lost David as a pawn in her game? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and it would be more shocking than anyone could imagine. Dorothy Thompson's revenge came from a direction no one expected. 3 days after David's funeral, which only Jessica, Tyler, still in the hospital, and surprisingly the triplets wanted to attend, Marcus was in his office when Margaret Chen called with panic in her voice. Marcus, you need to come to my office immediately, and bring Sarah. What happened? Dorothy Thompson filed a civil lawsuit against you. She's alleging wrongful death through negligence. Marcus felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. What? She's claiming that your predatory interference in David's life caused a mental breakdown that led to the fatal accident. She wants $50 million in damages and immediate custody of the triplets. This is insane. It gets worse. She hired Harrison and Associates, the most aggressive law firm in Boston. They specialize in high-profile cases involving wealthy people. Marcus hung up and immediately gathered Sarah and the triplets. We're leaving town for a few days. Why? Asked Sarah. Marcus quickly explained the situation. Dorothy is going to try to use the media to create public pressure. She wants it to look like I'm a predatory rich man who destroyed a family. But that's not true, said Emma indignantly. Sometimes the truth doesn't matter, sweetheart, said Marcus sadly. Sometimes only what people believe matters. They went to Marcus's summer house in Cape Cod, but not even there were they safe from the media storm Dorothy had created. The first article appeared in the Boston Globe the next day. Predatory billionaire destroys family, causes tragic death. The story painted David as a desperate father trying to reconnect with his daughters, only to be crushed by Marcus's power and money. Dorothy was portrayed as a grieving grandmother seeking justice. Sarah threw the newspaper away in disgust. They don't even mention that David abandoned us when I had cancer. The truth will come out in court, promised Marcus, but he was worried. Harrison and Associates were masters at manipulating public opinion. The second blow came when Jessica Morrison called. Marcus, she said, crying, they came to my house. They offered money for me to lie about David. Who came? People from Dorothy. They said if I testified that David was improving as a father before he died, they'd pay all of Tyler's medical bills. Marcus was furious. And you said that they could go to hell, Jessica replied firmly. But Marcus, they said if I don't cooperate, they'll sue to have Tyler raised by his paternal grandmother. Marcus realized Dorothy's brilliant and evil play. She wasn't just attacking his custody of the triplets. She was trying to gather all the grandchildren under her control. Jessica, do you and Tyler want to come stay with us for a while? Would it be safe? Marcus looked at the triplets playing on the beach, free and happy. Safer than facing Dorothy alone. Jessica and Tyler arrived the next day. Tyler, 8 years old, was still recovering from injuries from the accident, but was determined to tell the truth about his father. Dad told me he was going to get my sisters, Tyler told Marcus. He said Grandma Dorothy promised we could all be a happy family if he got you back. He used those words? Got you back? Tyler nodded. He seemed scared, Uncle Marcus. Grandma Dorothy yelled at him a lot. The pieces were falling into place. Dorothy hadn't just manipulated David, she had terrorized him into submission. The next night, Marcus received an unexpected call from Detective Sullivan. Sterling, we found Dorothy Thompson. Where? In Las Vegas, trying to board a flight to Mexico. Apparently, she emptied all the family business bank accounts yesterday. Marcus smiled for the first time in days. So she was running. It gets better. We found evidence that she sabotaged David's car. There were records that she bought mechanical tools 2 days before the accident. Marcus felt a mixture of horror and vindication. She killed her own son. It looks that way. David had called her the night before the accident, saying he was going to withdraw the lawsuit and that he wanted to do the right thing for his daughters. Apparently, Dorothy couldn't allow that. When Marcus told Sarah the news, she collapsed. "My God," she whispered. "Dorothy killed David because he was finally making the right choice." Marcus held her. "And now she'll never hurt our children again." "Our children?" Sarah looked at him. Marcus realized what he had said. "Sarah, I mean, I know what you meant," smiled Sarah. "And you're right. They are ours." The next morning, the headlines were completely different. Killer grandmother, woman murders own son in scheme to extort billionaire. Public opinion changed overnight. Dorothy Thompson went from grieving grandmother to manipulative villain. But the best news came when Margaret Chen called. Marcus, Harrison and Associates withdrew the lawsuit. Without Dorothy to finance the action, and with the criminal charges against her, they have no case. Marcus gathered all the children, Emma, Grace, Sophie and Tyler, on the porch overlooking the ocean. "Children," he said, "do you want to know the best part of all this?" "What?" they asked in chorus. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "The best part is that now we're officially a family, all of us." Tyler looked confused. "Me too." "If you want," said Marcus gently. "Jessica and I talked. You can keep living with your mother, but you can also be part of our family." Tyler smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. "So I have 3 sisters now, and an Uncle Marcus," said Emma, hugging Tyler. As he watched the 4 children playing on the beach with Sarah beside him, Marcus finally understood what he had been looking for his whole life without knowing it. It wasn't success, money, or power. It was this: a family built with love, protection, and second chances. But there was still one last surprise waiting for all of them. 6 months later, Marcus Sterling was nervous in a way he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time and looked in the mirror of the master bedroom, a room that now had family photos everywhere. "Uncle Marcus, are you okay?" asked Sophie from the doorway. Marcus turned to see his 3 girls dressed in their prettiest pink dresses with flowers in their hair. "Just a little nervous, sweetheart." "Because of the wedding?" asked Grace with a mischievous smile. "It's normal to be nervous when you're going to marry Mommy," said Emma wisely. "Miss Jennifer said her daddy got so nervous he threw up." Marcus laughed. "I hope I don't throw up." "We wouldn't let you," said Sophie, climbing on a chair to help Marcus with his tie. "Today you're going to be our real daddy." Marcus knelt to be at the 3 girls' height. "Girls, you know I'm already your daddy in my heart, right?" "The wedding doesn't change that, but now it'll be official," said Emma. "And Tyler said after the wedding he can call us his real sisters too." Marcus's heart filled. Tyler had decided to split his time between Jessica, who had moved to a nearby house, and the new, expanded family. The boy had flourished with all the attention and love, and was clearly the protective older brother the triplets had always wanted. "Where is Tyler?" asked Marcus. "Helping Mommy get dressed," said Grace. "He said she was crying, but they were happy tears." Marcus smiled. Sarah had cried happy tears many times in the last 6 months. Her hair had grown back completely. Doctors declared her cancer-free, and she had found her strength again, both physical and emotional. "Are you ready to be bridesmaids?" asked Marcus. "We were born ready," all 3 shouted in chorus. The ceremony would be small and intimate, just family and some close friends in the mansion's garden. Marcus had offered a big party, but Sarah wanted something simple and meaningful. "Uncle Marcus," said Emma suddenly, "will you miss your other family?" Marcus paused. He knew she was referring to Charlotte, his biological daughter in Europe. "Sometimes," admitted Marcus honestly. "But you know what I discovered?" "What?" "I discovered that love has no limits. Loving you doesn't mean I love Charlotte less. It means my heart grew to have room for more love. And maybe someday Charlotte will want to meet her sisters, said Sophie hopefully. Marcus smiled. Actually, he had sent Charlotte an invitation to the wedding. She hadn't responded, but the door was always open. Maybe, said Marcus. But even if that never happens, our family is complete. An hour later, Marcus was at the improvised altar in the garden, watching Tyler escort him down the aisle. The boy had grown so much in recent months, taking his role as big brother with adorable seriousness. Then came the triplets, throwing rose petals and trying not to run, without much success. The pure joy on their faces made several guests cry. And finally, Sarah. Marcus had to lean on Tyler to keep from falling. Sarah was radiant in a simple but elegant dress, her blonde hair shining in the sun, and a smile that lit up the entire garden. But it wasn't just her beauty that took his breath away. It was the journey they had traveled together, from desperate strangers to a family united by love and adversity. "You look beautiful," whispered Marcus when Sarah reached the altar. "You don't look bad yourself," she whispered back, making the triplets laugh. The officiant, Judge Morrison, who had presided over their first custody hearing, smiled at the couple. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered today to celebrate not just the union of Marcus and Sarah, but the official creation of a family that has already existed in their hearts for months." Marcus looked at the children, his children. Emma held Grace's hand, who held Sophie's hand, who held Tyler's hand. A human chain of love and protection. "Marcus," said the judge, "do you promise to love, honor, and protect not only Sarah, but also Emma, Grace, Sophie, and Tyler for the rest of your life?" "I do," said Marcus, his voice firm despite the tears. "Sarah, do you promise to love, honor, and build a life with Marcus, creating a home full of love for all these children?" "I do," said Sarah, her voice clear and strong. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Massachusetts, I pronounce you husband and wife, and more importantly, a family." When Marcus kissed Sarah, the triplets ran to them, creating a perfect family huddle. Tyler joined them a second later, and suddenly they were all hugging and laughing and crying at the same time. "We're a real family now," shouted Sophie. "We always were," said Marcus, hugging all of them. Later that night, after the simple but perfect party, Marcus was putting the triplets to bed when Emma asked a question that caught him by surprise. "Daddy Marcus?" It was the first time she had called him just Daddy instead of Uncle Marcus. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you remember the day you met us, when we were selling our toys?" "How could I forget? We asked you to help us because Mommy was sick," continued Emma, "but actually I think we were sent to help you too." Marcus felt tears coming again. "Why do you think that?" "Because you looked as sad as we did," said Grace. "And now you smile all the time." "Sad people help each other," added Sophie. Repeating the words she had said on the first day, Marcus kissed all three foreheads. "You're right. You saved me as much as I saved you." "Good night, Daddy," all three said in chorus. Marcus went downstairs and found Sarah on the porch, looking at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, hugging her from behind. "About how strange life is," said Sarah. "6 months ago I was dying and my daughters were selling toys on the street. Now we're a family." "We are." Sarah turned in his arms. "Marcus, do you really have no regrets about all the mess, all the drama?" Marcus looked through the living room window, where he could see photos of all his children covering the walls that were once empty and cold. "Sarah," he said, "before I met you, I was the richest and loneliest man in Boston. I had everything money could buy, but I had nothing that really mattered. And now?" Marcus smiled, pulling her closer. "Now I have everything." Upstairs, 4 children slept safe and protected. In Europe, a young woman named Charlotte Sterling opened an envelope that had arrived a few days before, photos from a wedding, with a note from her father that simply said, "The door will always be open." And in Boston, Marcus Sterling, businessman, billionaire, and now husband and father, finally understood that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in laughter during breakfast, hugs before bed, and in the absolute knowledge that you would give everything you have to protect the people you love. 3 little girls had sold their toys to save their mother, but in the process, they had bought something much more valuable for a lonely man, a family, and that was the best deal Marcus Sterling ever made. The end.